Hey everybody, today we're going to be going over Htb Permx. This is an easy retired box. But before we go into pwning anything, I would like to do some security research and look at the underlying CVE for this lab. So we'll go ahead and do that. So if we go to the National Vulnerability Database, we can see that CVE 2023-4220 has a CVSS score of 6.1, which is medium on the scale. If you take a look at the different vectors, you can see that the attack vector is network, meaning it can be exploited over the network. It has low complexity, and privilege required is none. User interaction is required apparently, but it actually isn't. There's a proof of concept where you can do an unauthenticated RCE. The scope shows change, meaning it could potentially affect other systems within the network, increasing the scope. And confidentiality, integrity, and availability impacts are low or none in this case. I don't exactly agree with uh, the severity of this vulnerability. I think it needs to be updated, but this is the information that's hosted by NIST. All right, next, let's take a look at Shodan. So Shodan shows there's 491 assets that are utilizing this vulnerable software. This doesn't indicate that all 149 of them or 491 of them are actually vulnerable. Instead, what it says that it's possible that they have a vulnerable version of this software. It would require additional enumeration to determine if they are actually vulnerable to CV 2023-4220. But with that said, why don't we go ahead and start the lab? Now, the purpose of going through that was so you can develop the ethical hackers methodology and understand the underlying CVEs. Take this in mind as you're going through your path and how you would defend your network or use this information to reinforce your knowledge. Next, we'll go ahead and open up a terminal once you've connected to the HackTheBox VPN. You can see my AL host is 10.10.14.6. If we do ifconfig times 0, we'll go ahead and rename this and create another tab. In order to do that, click on the File option here, a new tab, and you'll open up a new tab there. So with that done, you can go ahead and rename the tab accordingly to your localhost IP address. Again, this is your Kellybox IP address, your attack box, what have you. Once you do that, we'll go ahead and color code it to blue, because blue indicates it's the ethical hacker computer. Next, we'll go ahead and click on the next tab here, where we will then change that tab to our host. That's going to be the remote host. The hack the box victim, in this case, Xperms, is 10.10.11.23. Note that doesn't change. So once you edit this to that host, remote host IP address, then you should be good to go. We'll go ahead and color code this one red as the third target. All right, once color coded, we're ready to start enumerating. I'll just go ahead and grab the nmap command that we'll use to enumerate this. The nmap command will scan all ports 0 to 65,353, I believe. That's all the ports. And it'll be outing the contents of that scan into a file, although it'll also out it into the terminal, so that's not exactly required, but we'll go ahead and paste that in there. The only things we need to change would be the rhost IP address in this instance, and the name of the file that's being outed to Permx, so that's we are aware of that. All right. Remember, this is running as sudo, so you want to go ahead and enter your password once you've done that. It should run the scan and come back with some information here. So looks like port 22 SSH and port 80 is open for HTTP. This is good information as we can start looking at HTTP In most cases, when you're doing hack the box, you'll notice that the service website being hosted on port 80 requires a change in your ethost file so that you can do the IP address to domain name resolution. So we'll go ahead and keep that in mind as we try to access that site. We'll go ahead and rename this nmap. This keeps our terminal pretty nice and organized and clean. We'll go ahead and open up another one here. Right. And this one right here is going to be sub, and this is how we're going to do our subdomain enumeration. Now, take in mind, what is a subdomain? Well, let me give you an example. So you have spacex.com, that's our primary domain, and then you may have something like test.spacex.com, that would be considered a subdomain that falls under the primary domain. You may even see another example such as staging, staging.spacex.com. Those are both subdomains. So before we start identifying the attack surface and directory structure for a specific domain, why don't we go ahead and look for any subdomains which may be vulnerable. In order to do that, we'll go ahead and use FUF. FUF is a fuzzing application, and all we need to do is input fuzz on the port of the domain that we want to actually fuzz or directory structure. Since we're looking for subdomains, we'll go ahead and enter what was shown earlier. Now we're going to go into sudo nano ethost. This will allow us to view the ethost file and input a name resolution for the IP address of the R host and the subdomains that we will identify, as well as the primary domain, which cannot be accessed unless you do this. So if you open up Google Chrome, you're going to notice that you need to input, it's going to redirect you to the domain name of, and you'll see this in a second, perm.htb, so permx.htb. We need to make sure we add this to our ethost file, otherwise we will not be able to access it because it doesn't know, it doesn't have a DNS server to point to, so we have to manually enter that information in. You can see I've already entered that for permx.htb and lms permx.htb. Go ahead and do that now, and go ahead and save your content by Control-O, Control-X afterwards. That should save those contents in your ethost file and allow you to navigate to both those sites. We can see that LMS is an interesting site that we're going to look at and see what services are running on it. All right, so again, this is the fuzzing command we're going to run. Just note that that permx.htb is in there for the URL, and that's what it's going to be fuzzing. Now, immediately we notice that it identified www and LMS subdomains. With that in mind, we'll go ahead and navigate to those and see if we have any vulnerable services running on those. Again, go ahead and make sure that you save that in your TLS file if you haven't already done that. Otherwise, you'll not be able to access those sites. All right, and if we navigate to LMS perm.htb, we'll notice that we have Jamila, which is running its e-learning collaboration software portal. Now, we wanted to see if we can just log in with admin. In this case, we will not work. So we'll have to find a exploit that we can use to gain access to this portal. Go ahead and fast forward this 30 seconds. All right. So fast forward to 30 seconds, you can see that search exploit was used here to see if we had any exploits in which didn't really find anything. So I had to just Google it, Google software, see what comes up. In this case, we had a GitHub, which shows an interesting exploit that we can possibly use to upload RC POC that actually seems to work, as well as a number of other CVEs that affected this software. All right. So here we can see this one. This isn't the one that we're going to be looking at. Instead, we're going to be looking at the GitHub one here. And if you take a look at it and just a proof of concept, it looks like they're uploading a PHP file. With that in mind, we can go ahead and do that and upload a web shell and gain access to that server. All right, so what we're going to do is I'll go ahead and scroll back a little bit here. All right, so we have this command here. It's echo in the PHP system get command. It's going to out it that this PHP script that we can query in a file called shell.php. We'll then use curl to create this shell.php file, which should be in the directory that our terminal is currently in. And then once we do that, we'll go ahead and upload it using curl. Fast forwarding here, you can see that this is the curl command that we'll be using to upload it. And once done, it says successfully uploaded. In this case, it looks like the file allowed read and write access as well as posting to that directory, which is not good. All right, so once that's done, we can curl that file and query the command cmd ID. ID will show the user who we're currently logged into, and we can see it's www.data. All right, so that's good indication that this will work. Take in mind, we haven't used the exploit server at this point. We've only uploaded a file and queried it. So you can see how dangerous the CVE may be. I'll go ahead and move my cursor out of that screen so you can see what's going on here. But we have a reverse shell. You can go ahead and input this command. Make sure that you put your outhost IP address for 10.10.14.16. That should be your IP address for your attack box. We're going to listen on port 445, and we should be getting a reverse shell from that port. So we'll do netcat dash LNVP 445 and begin listening on that port. Going back over here, we can see that we're going to out this into a rev.php file, which again be in that directory on attack box. Once we upload this to that web server, we should be able to execute it, gain access. So here you can see the rev.php file, and soon we'll go ahead and upload that. Minute, go ahead, fast forward this a little bit. We'll go ahead and sorry, back another 30 seconds here. So here we can see that we've curled that rev.php shell, and after doing so, we were able to get a reverse shell. My apologies that that looks like this is in the way, but I'll go ahead and try to move this out of the way here so you can see it. There it is right there. That's the command that you will be inputting and running. Now, once you curl it, you should receive a netcat reverse shell connection here, and we're going to be on the hunt for configuration files. Typically, when you're in the web directory of a service, you'll find configuration files, and in most cases, they will have passwords. In this case, they did have a password for Chamillo. Interestingly, that wasn't the password for the user, which we can use to gain SSH access, as we noticed that was open earlier, but we can still use those credentials. So looking for the config files, we actually found one. Go ahead and rewind just a little bit so you can see the command that was run there. Give this a second. But what we did was we catted a PHP configuration file. And I'll go back up to the top as I talk over this. But the main thing I want you to take in mind here is that we have found a password within that file. So I'm going to fast forward just a little bit so we're not having to watch me just try to go through the file. But within this file, we were able to find this password here for Camillo and a DB password. We'll go ahead and pause that so you can see the command that was run. And you can see I catted this var w Camillo app config configuration PHP file. And then these are the credentials that we had found in that file. With that knowledge, we're going to go ahead and try to SSH with those credentials. I can tell you that's not going to be successful because that's not the user's password in this case that we're looking for. The actual user is, let me go ahead and scroll through this. Find that user was, don't want to say it incorrectly, but NTX. And the way we found that was looking at the pass WD file, which lists all the users. There was a user named NTZ, and when we put those credentials in for NTZ, we gain SSH access to that user's account on that server. So I'll go ahead and fast forward this just a little bit so you can see that and how that was run. So when we cat out the Etsy password file, you can see that there's an MTZ right here. We'll go ahead and use MTZ, put in Jamello's credentials, and see if we have access. All right, looks like we have access. Great. So next thing we're going to do is start enumerating. In this case, we're going to enumerate. I'll just kind of fast forward through this, but we have the sudo-l indicates that there is a file here. And I'll go ahead and pause sudo-l, no password for the auth sh script. This script right here is testing to see if it's possible that directory traversal is occurring. If so, it's blocking that from occurring. This is an interesting file because we can create some type of we can essentially create a symbolic link to a file that will ultimately edit the Etsy sudoers file that will allow MTZ to execute any command as root without having to specify a password. And so we'll go ahead and do that. Once we do that, we should be able to execute sudo.bash and gain access to the flag. Go ahead and kind of fast forward through this just a tad bit. Out of the way. All right, so these are the commands that we're going to run. And it should be seen on your screen shortly, but you have the in ln space dash s and then that's the sudoers root. We're going to go ahead and do the sudo acl, just adding that to it, and then echoing a line within that file that would allow MTZ to access root without having to put any password in. And so with that said, we'll go ahead and execute sudo.bash, and we'll have a root bash. Yeah. So now that we have access to the root.txt flag, we can go ahead and cat it out to see it. I can't post it here due to hack the box rules, but you can. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Um, Again, this is Danny, and there's my pup in the background, just chilling out. Hope you like and subscribe, and thank you very much. Danny out.